I think at this point I can confidently say that Sukuna has never had a chance of walking away from this series as the victor, and happily so. This series ending with Sukuna defeating everybody and walking away has been a legitimate concern for a while now, and honestly, I can't even blame people for thinking that's a possibility. But with chapter 265 kind of changing the entire landscape of Jujutsu Kaisen by revealing the endgame purpose of the story that Gege wanted to tell through Yuji, I believe there's a 99% chance that Sukuna's getting clapped, no doubt. Of course, I value the time of both you and I, so I'll wrap up this intro. But I gotta say, if you enjoy content such as this, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and now, let's get into it. From my perspective, Jujutsu Kaisen has always been a story that could be perfectly explained with this one quote from Aoi Todo alone. All of our allies, together we are Jujutsu sorcerers. As long as we live, our friends who have passed away will not truly have been defeated. It's not about sins or punishment. The moment we become sorcerers, our lives cannot be limited to such misfortunes. Looking for meaning or logic in death can at times defile the memories of those we've lost. Even so, what have you been entrusted with? You don't need to answer right now. However, until you find your answer, never stop moving. This quote reflects the never-ending marathon of Jujutsu sorcery that Yuji enters in order to exterminate the curse that is Sukuna. Those who have entered the marathon and have passed away are gone, yes, but there's more to their life than their death. Everyone who has come before you has entrusted you with something of their own to help you continue the never-ending marathon, and it's up to you to eventually figure out what you've been left with. Yuji takes his pep talk from Todo and utilizes it to continue fighting against Mahito, this curse that cannot value such a thing as this, a life and the value behind it. And eventually Yuji completely actualizes this belief in his final talk with Sukuna. This belief that stands against everything that our favorite fiend Sukuna represents. Jujutsu Kaisen has always been a story about living for more than yourself, for those around you. We see this through many characters in the story, such as Gojo for example. Gojo, despite being this badass one-man army, had always been a character who would prioritize the future generation of sorcerers and their growth before his own satisfaction. If anything, Gojo served as a warning against the viewers trying to become anything like Sukuna. Because when you compare the two characters, the key difference is the humanity that Gojo retains as a monster, whereas Sukuna is devoid of any at this point. And we see the effect of this through their purpose as characters. Sukuna lives to seek endless pleasure, which is simply unsustainable, whereas Gojo's purpose is to create a generation that will prevent anything like him coming out of it. A one-man army who can only rely on himself and has to bear the burden of single-handedly maintaining peace throughout the entire world. And this purpose would be formed from the moment Gojo lost his best friend due to being unable to see him mentally deteriorate in front of his eyes until it was too late. Gojo, even in his final moments, would express a deep sorrow for believing that he was unable to give Sukuna the same feeling that he got from their battle. The once-in-a-millennium chance to cut loose with all their overwhelming strength and convey everything they had to someone else in a world where none understood them. I mean, even in this same death chapter, we have Nanami say something like, "I'm someone who always looked back at the past, yet in the end, I would bet it all on the future." This referring to the curse he placed on Yuji. Speaking of Nanami, he himself also falls in line with the lesson of Jujutsu Kaisen and is probably the best example of it. If you remember from very early on in the series, he quit being a sorcerer for a brief period of time in order to become a salaryman, retire early, and live an isolated, peaceful life in Malaysia. That's all he's ever wanted to do really. He despised being a sorcerer for the specific reason of having to force his comrades to accept that they'd be sacrificing their own lives for the sake of others. And after seeing this come into play when it came to his friend Haibara, I'm sure he was haunted by it. Gege Akutami himself would even state that when Nanami heard Geto had become a curse user, Nanami was able to completely understand why Geto would take this path, but he did not agree with it. Of course, where the two differ in their trauma is the fact that Geto had been mocked by the humans he had to protect, and that image stood in his mind permanently. However, Nanami would eventually return to Jujutsu Society when he'd visit a bakery and see a cursed spirit behind the girl at the register. Here, he'd be thinking about how his job does nothing but make the rich richer, whereas this baker is essential to the lives of many, allowing them to feed themselves daily. From his perspective, it's completely unfair that she gets paid so much less than he does. So this makes Nanami decide to swat the fly head behind her. This would get rid of the back pain she had been feeling, and although from her perspective it looked like Nanami just randomly swung his arm, she knew he helped her somehow. So she'd tell him thank you, please come again. And Nanami here would then think to himself that he once believed that he had nothing to live for, and this moment served to remind him of the true value of a jujutsu sorcerer. Being a jujutsu sorcerer transcends just living for yourself, and once Nanami took that in, he returned to society. Even Yuji, our main character, would spend majority of the series struggling with how he should obtain a meaningful death, if he deserves to live, etc., to finally come to the conclusion that every life has meaning because that life exists, and the value of these lives are again reinforced by the memories they leave within themselves and others. It's just great, and you can even apply this belief to Sukuna himself, who is only seen as the strongest, the king of curses, the honored one, because of memories that he's left in others. Although I'm sure he himself doesn't really care much, he at least understands this. All this to say, you can apply Yuji's speech to the life of any character in this series, and it makes everyone's character arcs that much stronger. In a way, it can be viewed as a slight at viewers who say things such as this character is wasted, because in Gege's eyes, they served their purpose and were a strong character for what they were. They don't need to have 50 chapters of the spotlight in order to display any value. Understanding what the Jujutsu Marathon truly stands for, and how not a single sorcerer's efforts were wasted, seems to be essential to understanding one of, if not the core message that Gege is pushing with this series. Sukuna, on the other hand, is literally the king of curses. He holds a title that displays that he's both the calamity and the antithesis of all sorcerers. A cannibal, hedonist, whatever negative term you want to apply to him, it likely fits. Sukuna lives for himself and his pleasure, nothing more, nothing less. Anything that lives and does not benefit him is of no interest. From his perspective, they're worthless. A monster such as Sukuna that is as selfish as one could possibly be stands against everything the entire story has been putting in our face and trying to teach us. Sukuna winning would tell the viewers that no lives but the ones that benefit you have value, that you should live to only seek pleasure in whatever way you see fit, and that you should eat your neighbors. Man, you get the point. People will of course ask, why has Sukuna been winning most of his fights if Gege thinks very low of his character? Well, it's because people like Sukuna in real life, selfish, ruthless, all the above, do seem to win most of the time, but their actions always bite them back whether you see it or not. In the end, nobody wants to deal with or be around horrible people that are like Sukuna. However, there is another way to interpret Sukuna's existence in Jujutsu Kaisen. Sukuna lives such an anti-human experience that it's impossible to become anything like him in the first place. Sukuna is absolutely satisfied with living a lonely existence as the strongest, and to be satisfied with a life that contains nothing but the emptiness that comes from being the strongest, you have to be inhuman. Because humans are social creatures and need other humans. This is why characters such as Gojo and Kashimo had always been hyper-focused on that same feeling that Sukuna is so easily able to ignore. It's important to even point out that Kashimo saw other people as grains of dirt, yet his entire character arc revolved around understanding why he couldn't connect with these same grains of dirt. Even despite Kashimo being a textbook sociopath, he couldn't even ignore his human engineering to desire a connection with someone or something. Sukuna, though, can somehow manage this mentally, but for any real human, this wouldn't be possible. Either way, I'm sure Gege doesn't want his readers taking anything from Sukuna's character. He's a breathing plague, and with chapter 265 basically confirming that Jujutsu Kaisen is a story about the people around you and appreciating the value that they have in yours and others' lives. Sukuna, in all of his selfishness, stands as a firm antithesis to the message Gege has attempted to communicate using this story as a medium. And I even believe that he serves as a cautionary character for those who want to abandon compassion and become just as selfish as he is for their own ambitions. This barely human deviant can withstand and revel in such a miserable life devoid of true purpose, but would you be able to? With that said, thank you for watching.